Well, hello. Welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today is the author Cecelia Tichi. We're going to be talking about her book, Gilded Death, and all of the books that follow it, but mostly it's going to be about this. Cecelia, welcome to the show.
Hello, Paul. Glad to be here.
My pleasure, and it's great to be here. I can't wait to talk about your book and to find out a little bit more about you. But as followers of the show are familiar, we like to start things off talking about things we may have read or watched lately. Now, I'll go first just to give Cecilia a little time to try to remember what it is I watched last week, or wait, what was the name of that book? So I took a couple of plane trips the past few weeks. So that's where I've caught up on a lot of my movie watching. So I watched on the plane, I watched Quiet Place Day One, which I really enjoyed, which has probably for like an hour and a half long movie, probably has about 10 minutes of dialogue in the whole thing. Everything else is visual because it has to be because of the evil aliens. The other one was a movie that came and went very quickly over the holidays called Here, which I know was directed by Robert Zemeckis, and it had Tom Hanks and Robin Wright in it. And it was a very interesting concept. It's all set in this one spot uh, in that it takes place over millennia. That we see it as when the dinosaurs are there, and then when some Native Americans are there, and then like during the Revolutionary War, and then the turn of the century, and all these different families that lived in this house in this one location over the course of the 20th century. And it was just really clever, and they kind of bounce around throughout the whole thing from time period to time period. I can see why it didn't do well at the box office, but it was still a fun watch. And we were talking before we started. Cecilia lives in the Nashville area. We're talking about tornadoes. And over the weekend, I finally got to watch Twisters, the sequel to the movie from a couple of years ago. And this, I thought it was silly but fun, and I enjoyed it. I don't think I ever need to see it again. So that's on my end. So Cecilia, what about you? Reading, watching, what have you?
Well, I'm coming up with a book I recently read. Uh, and forgive me, I'm struggling to remember the name of the author of all things. The book is Raising Hare, Hare. They're not rabbits, they're hares. I got onto it a weekend. Wall Street Journal, the weekend reviews, I think, are really good. And here it was. Uh, she's a London policy wonk, really an urban person who has a country house that she's never occupied more than a couple of days at a time. It's a renovated barn outside of London, somewhere in the country. And then the pandemic hits, and she's in that country house, and she's out for a walk, and there is a baby hare. She bypasses the hare. She's not a nature writer. She's not a nature person. No Thoreau for her. No William Wordsworth poetry. She's in, government policy. On the spur of the moment, she has to be ready to fly to the ends of the earth on missions. On the way back on the walk, there's the little hare. And you know what's going to happen. She doesn't see the mother. She grabs up some leaves so she doesn't touch it. She nestles it in the leaves and takes it into the barn country house. And so it starts. Careful not to anthropomorphize. Careful not to be one more of these animal encounter books. But I couldn't put it down, and I was sorry when it concluded. And what it appeals to me for is fairly straightforward, blunt talk,
Hmm.
not the lush descriptions we see in so much nature writing. But what happens is that her life does change. As the daily routines sort of coordinate with the routines of the hare. It's well written. It then got reviewed in the Sunday Times, New York Times. On one of the staff recommended picks. It's got beautiful little illustrations, drawings. And by the end, you really know a hare is not a rabbit. Don't confuse the two. And it's to the hare's advantage that it is a hare. So that's what I've been I finished it and I was sorry. I even went back and reread a few of the opening scenes, and then I passed it on to a friend.
Oh, very nice.
Sure.
Raising hair. Okay, okay. We'll see if we can track down the author's name. So let's talk a little bit about Cecelia Tichi, who is the author of the book today, A Gilded Death. So I'm going to read the about the author bio page from the back of the book. Cecelia Tichi is a native of Pittsburgh, the Steel City of the Gilded Age, and is an award-winning teacher and author of numerous books focused on American culture and literature. Her most recent titles, What Would Mrs. Astor Do? The Essential Guide to the Manners and Mores of the Gilded Age, was followed by Cocktails of the Gilded Age, History, Lore, and Recipes of America's Golden Age, and the sequel, Jazz Age Cocktails, History, Lore, and Recipes from the Roaring Twenties. The Val and Roddy, is it DeVere? That's what I want.
Yeah.
Okay, right. The Val and Roddy DeVere mystery series premieres with this book, A Gilded Death. So, Cecilia, lots of questions are raised just by that bio, but let's first talk about you. How did you get your start? Were you a voracious reader as a child? Were you kind of one of those types that, I like to read, but it's not really for me, and then you decide, hey, I've got an idea for a story, and I'm just going to start writing things down.
I wish I could say that I grew up in a book-lined house. Not at all. My parents didn't read. Nobody in my family read. What I got committed to were comic books. They were 10 cents at the time, and my favorites, and I got them all. I got Superman and Superboy. I really liked the superheroes because the males had action. But my favorite was Little Lulu.
Oh, okay.
Um, uh-huh. And Lulu ran the neighborhood. She was really the boss. I think she was the early feminist. And and what I found in comic books was vocabulary
Hmm.
because those bubbles of dialogue and of thought had new words, and I learned them from those bubbles. So eager to read, but there were not again there were not books surrounding me, and it really wasn't until closer to frankly closer to high school and grade school. I mean, grade school in Florida for a while, and we could take out one book a week from the school library. And after an afternoon, it was consumed. And then a year in Pittsburgh with my dad, and I'm in the Carnegie Library, and the librarian says, "What are you doing out this late after dark? Do they know you're out?" And I said, "I'm looking for a book." I couldn't remember the name Stuart Little,
Hmm.
E.B. White's wonderful book. I said, "It's a book like Stuart the Mouse." She said, "We have no book, Stuart the Mouse. You better get yourself home." So I never thought of libraries as friendly places when I
Oh
was a
my.
kid. I think they've changed a lot. So that's pretty much, it's a patchwork reading history. But the foundation were the comic books.
Okay, so what led from, I guess, the gradual development from, the love of comic books and the information that it provided beyond just, just visual entertainment. So how did that lead on to developing your writing?
I start to write. Now and then a teacher would assign a composition that was, say, a description of an object, or even a story. And I found it to be rewarding to describe even a book. I described a book in the eighth grade, and the comment was, "This is an excellent picture, Cecelia, of just a book." I thought, "What are you, an English teacher, and you're just a booking me?" So, uh, and then I remember writing a short story. Fast forward to my freshman year at Penn State. And you could take a freshman course in creative writing. I had no idea what that would be. I had no idea that the teacher would be someone named John Barth, um, or that the writer of Catch 22 was one of the buddies of the faculty. And and Barth was very encouraging. And I remember a spring weekend. It was the spring weekend when the sororities and fraternities, made floats for their parade. And from my dorm window, I could see the floats, and I was writing a story. And I was pleased to be where I was, writing, trying to think of just the best phrase, get the story moving. And I'd rather be at my typewriter and with a pen in my hand than stuffing crepe paper into chicken wire out there in the street. Even though they were all friends and I was by myself, I liked it better.
I can totally relate to that, especially the stuffing crepe paper into chicken wire part. All right. So, you developed the love of writing. So, how did that result in your first book in the series, Gilded Death? I mean, I was going to say, what was the inspiration for the story?
Um, that's I'm not I don't mean to pause. This is our time. I've got to tell you. Um, I became interested in the Gilded Age before people were saying the Gilded Age. Maybe 20 years ago, teaching um, became interested in the literature of the labor movements. Jack London got my attention. He is a much more important writer, public intellectual. He can't get into an American Masters documentary because he was a socialist.
Hmm.
And it's not going to happen. So I was in the Gilded Age from the bottom up. Uh, there are two figures that became crucial for my Val and Roddy series. Related to Val, there was uh, an Irish immigrant, uh, came to America during the potato starving time, got himself a job in the Brooklyn shipyards. His name is John McKay. And he then went west to seek his fortune, mining in the silver mining country in Nevada. Very smart man. And he was convinced that the silver bonanza was not over. And he managed to buy up some stakes, and he began his serious mining. The School of Mines at the University of Nevada, Reno is named for him, and there is a bronze statue of him out front. I imagine him as the father of Val, because Val has inherited his multi-millions. John McKay, just before his death, was in a partnership with J.P. Morgan to fund a transatlantic cable to compete with the one that the Western Union Company had a monopoly on. Just to say how rich he was, that rich.
Mhm.
So my Val, is his fictional daughter based on Evelyn Walsh McLean. Evelyn, whose father was mining gold in Colorado when everybody thought there was no more gold, and he struck it rich, and they moved to Washington and were socialites, wealthy, funding a lot of philanthropy. Evelyn was a kind of a free spirit. Slept then on satin sheets. She owned the Kohinoor diamond for a while. She's the only Newport social queen there in the summer who knew the names of all her servants and something about their lives. She said, though she slept on satin sheets, she remembered sleeping in itchy wool union suits in the sub-zero Colorado winters under a bear rug. She never forgot where she came from.
Mhm.
And that has been the base of my inspiration for Val. She's rich. She's in the East Coast. She married a fifth generation Knickerbocker gentleman who comes with his own ideas of propriety. He, Roderick Wyndham de Vere, has his own, I hope, interest. Um, he, as a teenager, would be sent to the Barnum Museum on an afternoon, and he got tired of looking at the mummies and the whale's teeth, and he walked down the block where a bartender named Jerry Thomas was mixing something very new called cocktails, because those drinks are inventions of the Gilded Age. Before the Gilded Age, you drank your whiskey straight. You saw it come out of the bottle. Um, it was not diluted with anything. The first dilutant that anybody can figure out historically was ice. Uh, and the cool drinks were appreciated, and the sound of the ice chiming against the glass was also enjoyed. And it went from there to fruit juices, and bitters and all sorts of compounds. Roddy got interested in mixing cocktails, and that, when his family went west, they were rich. They lost a lot of money from bad investments. They're in Nevada. His father hopes to strike it rich in the silver mines. It won't happen. But he shows off a drink to Miss Valentine Mackle, and that drink is a blue blazer. It's an actual drink, two silver mugs, in one of them, an inch of Scotch whiskey, in the other, uh, sugar water and a little lemon. Hold them up, and mugs that have heat-proof handles. You set that scotch alight, and you pour it from one mug to the other and back and forth, these arcs of blue flame, and it's called the Blue Blazer. And that bartender from down the block at the Barnum Museum, he tended bar in Louisville at the Pendennis Club, sometimes in Virginia City, and that's where the blue blazer was first invented. So Roddy did a blue blazer. I have asked some bartenders, "Did you ever try one of those?" And the answer, if it's ever a yes, it's followed by once. That's too much. So
Because
they meet, they fall in love, um, and her papa dies. She's an heiress. His family, therefore, benefits from her gazillions. And she then is a fish out of water on the East Coast. She's too rich to be ignored, but she's too outside the social norms to be accepted. So it's her Western angle of vision, and he's a lawyer by training, and always those cocktails. And that's those two. Just to say, in the book, A Gilded Death, which you have held up, thank you very much,
certainly.
that they are trying, Val and Roddy, they're trying to protect a good friend's life from possible murder. Their sleuthing begins in that book.
Mhm.
And then, because word gets around, they're called upon the next fall, and then winter comes, and then spring, and so it goes. And
And so that
that's
that leads all to their following adventures.
that's right. That's
Okay.
right.
Okay, so
Exactly.
so let's go back to the original question, but what was the inspiration for the story? I mean, you talked about the backgrounds of the two characters, but what was the impetus for you to think, okay, I love the Gilded Age. What would be a great story to tell as that takes place in this?
Well, let me confess that in the 2000s, I did write some other mystery novels. And they were published by Warner Books and New American Library. And then I left off, and did not think I'd get back to mysteries. But what caught my attention in mystery, and the genre is subdivided. Agatha Christie on one side, and maybe Patricia Cornwall and they on the other. How much blood and gore do you want to have in your reading hours? And I started to think, I've spent a lot of years in this period. If I were to launch mystery again, why would I do that? And I have to answer, because in mysteries, the premise is the world is out of joint. It's gone off the rails. And somebody is trying either to restore a better time in the past or to look forward to a future that will be an improvement on the current future. I mean, the current state of things. You know, I was not growing up as the daughter of a staunch Republican, and I would hear my father talk about the Eisenhower, you know, highway plans and the soil bank plan. And even before that, I remember my grandmother railing against Truman when Dewey lost. I mean, what was this? She, and staunch Republicans. But between high school and Penn State, I worked in a glass plant. We never called it a factory. It was the plant, Owens, Illinois Glass. Hard work, um, minimum wage at the time, federal, $1 an hour. I made seven at least. And if my shift was particularly efficient, weeding out the bad bottles, um, we got a bonus. It was unionized work, the Glass Bottle Blowers Association, and I still have my card. Um, at the end of the summer, my workmate, who was not going on to school, was able to buy herself a new Chevy. She had a middle class life ahead of her. It's the loss of that opportunity for so many people that has infuriated me from the time I saw it happening in the 1970s. And now, of course, we get the comeuppance of a
Mhm.
sort. Um, I think I turned to mystery and historical mystery as a way to imagine exactly what mystery ought to do, ought to be able to solve problems, ought to have characters who have some depth, ought not to be just clockwork. And some clockwork mystery novels are just terrific. Starting with um, who am I thinking of from the 1920s? Forgive me, I'm having one of these moments. But you see it operates mechanically. The other kind has depth. The reason that Sherlock Holmes and Watson are of interest because there's character there. The reason that John le Carré's books are wear so well is because of the depth of the characters, Smiley and the others. So I thought I want to try my hand at something closer to that. Not that I would ever compare myself.
Sure.
When people say, "Are you a writer?" I say, "Wordsmith."
That's great. Actually, I did want to ask you about, so especially with your background in writing mysteries, that what is your process for putting the story together? I mean, do you have the solution first and then kind of like reverse engineer it? Like what could lead, like this leads to this, but this is what leads to that? Or do you have a problem and then just work towards a solution? Like, okay, there's a dead body. How did they get there? Or is it like, okay, this is how they were killed, and I'm going to fill in all the blanks as I work my way backwards?
I I I feel I need to know who did it and why. And then the starting place. There needs to be a hook, bring the reader in. And when I heard in the middle of the night, fairly recently, an interview on the BBC with Ian Rankin, who described writing a novel as driving a car in the fog with bad lights, um, and over roads that are entirely unfamiliar. And I thought, that's it. I have sometimes felt, and I've not been in the military, I felt this is like the infantry where you crawl on your belly inch by inch, elbows digging and digging. Um, and and I have, and I think other writers would say this, gone into what become cul-de-sacs, dead ends. I've sliced away scenes,
Mhm.
chapters, and dreading to do it. But I heard an interesting remark from a no longer, I'm sorry to say, living Alabama mystery writer, Ann George. She had this wonderful series, uh, comedic, I mean, laugh out loud, funny, but mysteries.
Mhm.
And she said, we were having lunch. She said, when I go uh, into my writing space, and I have just an awful time of it, a bad day. Um, and then I look at the final product. I'll say, I hate the word product, but there it is. She said, I can't tell any longer where the bad days happened. And I feel that somewhat myself, which is a great relief, or who would do it again? I mean, if the whole process was just one rut, one pit hole, one sinkhole after another, I don't I think I might find something else to do,
Of
whatever that
course,
would
of
be.
course, it's like Dorothy Parker. I hate writing, but I love having written.
I've never, and you probably know this. I've been testing it around the last few days. Only write what you'd be interested in reading.
Oh, I say that all the time because
I never heard it. I mean, it's so
really.
true.
Well,
Yes.
well, that's
I
but
mean,
that's see, that's it's for me. It's with screenwriting that write a movie, write something that you would want to watch, and
ah,
so. But the thing is that I write something that would appeal to a lot of my material is I write stuff that would appeal to 14-year-old me, but also to present day me. So I try to keep it fun and enjoyable, but also I never seek to insult or downplay the reader's intelligence. That I want them. I don't spoon feed them information. I try to make the stories entertaining with three-dimensional characters, and I'm sure as a writer you do the same thing.
and I never discount age 14. I think it's a kind of landmark age.
Hmm.
And we are always like Russian dolls. In there is our 14-year-old.
Of course, of course. I
Yeah.
also wanted to ask you. Here it is. So, one of the things I noticed about the book, which we're talking about, Gilded Death, is that there is so much information surrounding the story. I mean, at the core, it's the mystery, but you also do a fantastic job of describing. About you talk about the clothes, the decor, the social mores, and the current events going on at the time. Was that a lot of research, or were these things you because of your interest in the time period you already had a kind of an inkling on, you just kind of expanded on it?
A lot of it I already had logged in.
Hmm.
I'm also talking to you from my upstairs, um, I don't know what to call it, study. I've probably got 2,000 books all around me. It's a pretty big space. Uh, but I had to acquire some references. For example, the fashion house, the House of Worth, an English costume designer who set up in Paris. And I have one of those elegant cocktail table books on Worth. And I can look in there, find the date, and see what Val or her friends need to wear. And just I I don't plagiarize, but I use those words of the period, not too many. And you know this. Uh, you don't want to overload.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes a book on this very period, I start in first paragraph and I'm just mesmerized. How does this writer know so much? I don't know this much. I should know this much. Second paragraph, same thing. I'm thinking, oh, I'm starting to struggle a little bit. Oh, do I have to know? Do I have to have this much? By the third paragraph, I think this is overwritten. No editor got to this person and said, thin it out. Um, I had an interview with Naomi Klein, the Canadian uh, activist and writer, whose first book titled "No Logo" on too much privatization. Uh, she said her editor confided in her and said, "Naomi, your reader has got 400 more pages with you. Um, the wit is good, the turns of phrase, uh, ration them, or nobody's going to get past chapter one.
Oh,
It's
wow.
too much." And it was good. And she said that was great advice.
Hmm.
She took it. And so I try to remember that. You have to give your reader, you know this, we do, little gifts along the way. Um, it needs to be enlivened, especially the middle of the book. The first part that my friend Steve Womack said, it's like a rocket launch. The end, why you feel the momentum, it's coming, it quickens. But he said that long, slow middle, it has to be recharged. And there it's a real challenge. Sometimes I ask my spouse, what? He says, somebody needs to be attacked in Central Park. Get it going. And he's right. So I will say also,
Well,
I'm married to a plot guy
hmm.
um, who, when we first got together, just he needed to tell me the latest Bond movie plot or what. And we had our beer and our pretzels, and I'd think, oh, really, this guy? But now, now I collect on all those plots.
Hmm. I was going to say it doesn't apply to your genre, but a great I forget where I read it. Something someone was writing like I got stuck for an idea for what happens next in my story, and when someone said, "Well, how about whatever the last sentence is?" Then you end it with, "And then the zombies attacked."
Okay,
Yeah,
Hemingway, when he wrote, at least I know this from the Key West days, he would manage to write his 2 pages, but he always wrote the beginning of the next day's work.
hmm.
And that,
So he could jump right in.
yep,
I
yep.
I
Bring on
have
the
heard about that one.
zombies. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when all else fails, zombies are a great fallback. One of the things I also wanted to ask you about, that I thought was really interesting, is that when I started the book, I did not realize that it was going to be told entirely in first person from Val's perspective.
Yeah.
Now, I thought that to me, you mentioned Sherlock Holmes, that it was very reminiscent because those are told from Dr. Watson's perspective. Now, was that your initial intention, or did you start writing it like in a Val says to Roddy, and then and then Roddy says to Val, or did you think I just want to tell it from Val's perspective from the outset?
Um, it felt more doable from Val's perspective, knowing as I did from the beginning that there were limitations, that any activity that her husband or anybody else engaged in would have to be reported somehow, would have to come secondhand. and the fear that there would be loss of vitality in the secondhand reports was is always with me. It's
Hmm.
always there. So the comfort level was with first person, uh, and I was advised not the ongoing present, put it in the simple past. Okay, uh, and and just know that what gets reported needs to advance the story and deepen the character who's recounting the event. So that's the combination of restriction and opportunity and limitation.
Okay, so I'm writing that down because that's great stuff. Restriction, opportunity, limitation. And one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is that so when I got the book and I was reading the back, and so it's a Val and Roddy mystery, so to speak. But as I was reading it, so I was because my wife and I are huge fans of Nick and Nora Charles from the Thin Man series, and I thought that's what it was going to be like. But and then as I'm reading, a lot of the story revolves around Val. Not that Roddy's a secondary character, but he's more supporting than co main protagonist. So was that part of the just to put more emphasis on Val? I mean, they're both fascinating characters, but the way you were describing them, the Val character had a bigger backstory. And also, I was wondering if that you wanted to put more focus on her to show that there was more to her, that she's not just trying to fit in as a social butterfly type, that she has this really unique backstory about her father the miner and how she's the newcomer into this world.
Uh, I would say that 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 Val is yes, she's front and center, and that is deliberate on my part. Maybe because I think there are more women readers. Maybe I'm weighting it in that direction. Probably so. Um, Maybe because I don't feel confident entering into a male consciousness. So I've given myself the opt out from that, which would be a challenge. Um, Let me bring up, if I may, uh, your reference to the Thin Man series, because that also occurred to me. This is a couple, and at the very end, their little dog comes in, um, and it would be Velvet. And I will tell you that right now, sleeping on a cushion under the table beside me is Velvet, my French bulldog, my French bulldog. And so and um, Alva, Alva Vanderbilt Belmont, one of the social queens, had a French bulldog. So I thought, okay, let let that almost abandoned dog be the De Vere's. And I did have the Thin Man series in mind. Um, Even the cocktails, because from the 30s, when Prohibition ended in 33, suddenly those movies, everybody had a cocktail ever and always in all the scenes. They were very small cocktail glasses. And it wasn't until we noticed it because we looked at the Thin Man series. I thought, well, let's just see what they're up to. Um, and of course, William Powell is the lead character, and Myrna
Hmm.
Loy the lesser character. So I've unbalanced or rebalanced for my Gilded Age series. But I did learn, and this is off our excuse me, our immediate subject. Um, the the Hugh Hefner moment, the Playboy host of cocktail parties, his main bartender in the Playboy clubs, Thomas Mario, advised ditching those little 3-ounce cocktail glasses. Bring on the 4.5-ounce glass. You will need to refill them fewer times. You'll be a better host. People will enjoy themselves more. And so those little tiny cocktail glasses have gone the way of shards. And now, I'm gonna have a sip of water here.
Quotes unquotes water.
Yeah, we go it's water. But now, um, and it is the Thin Man series that I did have in mind going along. Yes.
Sure, sure. Okay, so that raises two questions. So we talked in the beginning about some of your other books. Uh, oh, I had it here. The Jazz Age cocktails and cocktails.
Mhm.
So, and you also have several other Val and Roddy books. I have not read those. So, are all of the books that you have now, are all those set during the Gilded Age? Because I was very curious if you were going to try and like have them progress through the early parts of the 20th century. Like here they are, here they are during the war, here they are during the Jazz Age. Of course, it'd be, what, 20, 30 years older by then.
Right. Here's where I am after 7 books in which I take them around the year from 1898. Uh, there's Newport, then they're back in New York Central Park, then it's winter, Metropolitan Opera. There's a death in a box beside theirs, and then into spring, and then they're back in Newport. Now I'm advancing them 3 years to 1902. Val has been driving an 8 horsepower Fiat.
Oh my. Okay.
Roddy is trying to keep her in the equestrian world. He loves his high-stepping hackney uh, coach horses for the coaches, and they have their saddle horses still. Um, but what Val has in mind, because she, in the last 3 years, has been funding a successful children's camp
Hmm.
for the kids of the Lower East Side.
Okay.
Um, she is concerned that when those kids are finished with their schooling, they will need livelihoods. They will need employment. Now, on the old Albany Post Road, there is a tumble down roadhouse from the stagecoach days, the Black Horse Tavern. It's collapsing. It's no longer in operation. She wants to renovate it. She's buying the property. Um, she wants to think of a series of roadhouses all along the Boston Post Road for the automobile age. There will be filling stations, uh, and those young guys can learn mechanics for the cars that will need servicing. Some of the women will learn accounting and bookkeeping and management of the roadhouses, some of them for overnight. But that Boston Post Road runs along the acreage of the Knickerbockers who settled New Amsterdam. They will rent their properties for farms, they will never sell them.
Hmm.
The idea that someone is going to have automobile traffic might imperil the life of Valentine Mackle de
Oh
Vere.
my.
She gets plenty of warnings. We'll see what happens.
Okay. I was
Okay.
really hoping you were, because you said 1902, and I was really hoping somehow it was going to lead to them to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. I was like, I can just see you weaving Val and Roddy into the Wright brothers.
Well, there's a lot so much has will have been going on. And I have to weave some of that in. Indeed, I do. Um, there's also, let me bring up, if I may, a secondary character, a close friend of Val's, Cassandra um, Van Skyler Forster, who is a paranormal um, consciousness. I exploit it in all the in all of the novels, and I will in this one, and am. I'm not a psychic. Uh, I just think there are too many coincidences, and that Western culture discourages any exploration. Duke University had a program for a long time trying to study it. They couldn't come up with the hard data they needed. They've shut it down. Um, but in the consideration of secondary characters, this good friend is important to the books. She will inevitably have spells, we'll call them visions, about danger to Val and warnings to be careful and watch
Okay.
it.
Okay.
So Val, though she's been driving her little Fiat, she now sees a Daimler-Benz Mercedes
Mm,
turnabout, and she's ordering that car. And that's the car there were just a few in the United States. Willie K. Vanderbilt owned one.
hmm
Um, I should mention that the character on whom Val is based, Evelyn Walsh McLean, at a clam bake sort of picnic, they had a fortune teller. They all had their fortunes told. Evelyn Walsh's brother, Vincent, tried to have a fortune told. And the fortune teller said, he has no fortune.
mm,
He will not live another day. And they all laughed and scoffed. Here was this buxom young man, muscles, sharp. They're all driving back in a Mercedes, um, chauffeured. Vincent wants to take over the driving, and he does. Evelyn remembers suddenly the car swaying back and forth, the sound of wood crunching, metal screaming and crashing. When she wakes up in a hospital, it will be weeks because her life is at risk. It'll be weeks until she learns that her brother did not survive the accident.
mm.
So, things like that. Um, I'm not committed. I'm not disbelieving. Now, forgive me for straying far from what you asked me to talk
Oh,
about.
that's okay because it just reminded me of Marlena Dietrich in Touch of Evil, or Orson Welles says, "I want you to read my future," and she goes, "Your future is all used up." So that's what it reminded me of. So Cecilia, this has been a fascinating discussion. Lots of ground covered, and again, your book is A Gilded Death, and this is the first of how many series or how many books in the
There are
series?
now 7 out.
Seven. And where can people find out about the books and more about you and all of your other books as well?
Should go to my website, um, and to for the books. Uh, Here's my domain name,
Yes, please.
CECE books.com.
Okay. Are you on any other social media or is everything on your website?
Well, I'm in Facebook, on Instagram, but the best place is to go to the website, and sometimes, people will email. The email is there on the website, and I will respond.
Always
Um,
good.
and sometimes there's an invitation to go somewhere and do something, and I go and I do.
That's fantastic. Well, again, Cecilia Tichi, thank you so much for being here. Your book is A Gilded Death. This has been great stuff. Thank you so much for being here today.
I much appreciate the invitation, Paul.
Oh, my pleasure. And viewers and listeners, if you enjoyed today's show, please hit like. Feel free to leave a comment and subscribe. I do have my social media platforms. I've got my screenwriting blog at maximumz.blog. Still on Twitter for the time being at maximum_z for me. The show at podcast CWL. I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram. Both of those are at Pez Screenwriting, PEZ. Those are my initials. The show is on Blue Sky as well at podcast CWL. You can check out my Go Ahead and Ask books. Those are on Amazon. And before I go, I have to make sure I plug. I've finally launched the crowdfunding for my short film project, Shecky, that's on Indiegogo. It's Shecky, Shecky. It's a short film, thrillamedy, as I like to call it. So please feel free to take a look. Throw all the cash you want at it. I'm not going to say no. Like I said, that's Cecelia. I'm Paul, and this has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.